As in the previous night, the three companions were led to their chambers by one of the undead thralls. Exhausted as they were, and unsure of how much Yosamold would be able to hear, they did not speak a word on their way. It was only when they reached their destination that Lismond's tired voice broke their silence. Another day, another night, my friends. Hopefully the worst has passed. Remember, we'll be at Solaria tomorrow. The familiar territory should make things easier.
True, boss. Can't believe we're going back to the big city. Too bad we're not taking our wagon. We still had a few things there that I was hoping we could sell at the great market.
I doubt that matters now. If our master doesn't get us killed, I don't think we'll be needing the small change those trinkets will sell for,
added a resigned Ernon in response to Pepper's comment.
But what about the ponies? We left them at the wagon tied and all.
I don't think we can afford to get back for them. As much as it saddens me, I don't think we'll be seeing the poor beasts again.
Oh well, that's a shame. Gonna miss them, especially old Hag. She was a good loyal pony. She's been with us for quite some time now. She's certainly a tough one, a great pony I tell you. And I got her at such a good price. Did I tell you how I...
Oh, here we go again,
interrupted Ernon with tired annoyance. All right, lads, no time for one of our conversations now. You heard Gorith. We should be getting some sleep, said Lismond, as he gave Pepper a consoling smile and a pat on the back. We want to be on top of our game tomorrow. I'm hoping we'll be having a more relaxing time in Solaria, but it pays to be prepared just in case. I'll see you both in the morning. On the previous night, Pepper's unsettling night-class revelations had resulted in him having a very poor night's sleep. This was uncharacteristic of him, however. Pepper had always been great at sleeping, able to fall unconscious the moment his body was in a horizontal position. Even when the roaring snores of his priestly companion were keeping everyone else awake, Pepper would still be able to switch off. Yet now, for the second time in a row, he was completely unable to fall asleep. Last night, it had been the fear his night-class revelations had instilled in him. This night, however, the cause was not so clear, as he wasn't really feeling so afraid anymore. He kept turning around in his bed for hours, unable to drift into the dream world. Already having twisted and turned and rolled for hours, he was tired of all his usual positions, and was feeling uncomfortable in all of them. The man was thinking and thinking, trying to look for the reason that was preventing him from falling asleep. At some point, he even considered that perhaps searching for the reason was in itself the reason for his inability to sleep. That logic had soon made his head hurt, and he had quickly started looking for alternate, less confusing explanations. Pepper had lived the first years of his life with his uncle in the mountains. He didn't know how many years, since back then he didn't know one was supposed to keep track of that number, but he thought it must have been at least a decade. His uncle had been a man of few words, with an unfortunate preference for silence, but all in all a good man, who had provided him with food and a roof over his head. Pepper's days consisted of taking care of his goats, which, while being creatures of few words as well, were, unlike his uncle, great listeners. He would have lengthy conversations with them as he relaxed during the long summer afternoons of his childhood. Sometimes he would even take naps. Perhaps this was where his ease with spontaneous sleeping began, but it was not where it truly became a skill. That happened in Solaria. One morning, his uncle had led him outside of his modest wooden cabin and proclaimed he was now old enough to look after himself. With little ceremony, he simply gave him a bag full of bread and goat's cheese and told him it was time to leave his homestead. He was to walk in the direction of the rising sun and ask for directions to reach the city of Solaria, and that had been the end of his goat days. Pepper had eventually made it to the city, but by the time he had reached it, his clothing had gradually torn to rags and he had been almost starving. Fortunately, he had been quick to make friends among some of the street urchins that populated the gutters of Solaria. They were good fellows in general, but regrettably, as poor as they were, they couldn't be trusted. Pepper would always need to hide his food and silver from them, as he knew they would take them at the slightest opportunity. And it was ultimately thanks to that he had learnt how to fall asleep on command. You never knew when the next opportunity to get a good night's sleep was going to present itself, given how there weren't many safe places to sleep on the streets. For this reason, it was just as important to fall asleep quickly as it was to wake up at a moment's notice. So yes, Pepper had always been good at falling asleep, and he really didn't know what was wrong this time. To him, this was a very alien and novel experience. Perhaps it was the things he had seen in the sensoriums, or perhaps it was the horrible realities beneath the illusions that masked so much of the castle and its inhabitants. But those images, as ugly as they were not really on his mind anymore. He was usually good at ignoring the things that bothered him. Even those that would have been traumatizing to others, he was able to put out of his mind with ease once the initial shock had passed. It was then that it occurred to him, what if it wasn't the presence of something that was bothering him, but the absence of something? Pepper looked around his room and listened intently. He could hear the muted winds of the mountains outside and the intermittent crackling of his dying fire. Then he realised what he could not hear was the predictable nighttime dronings of Ernon's snoring. Quietly, Pepper slipped out of bed and approached the internal door which joined the two bedchambers together. Pressing his ear to the door, he listened intently but heard nothing. Concerned now, he carefully lifted the latch handle and very slowly inched open the door to the priest's room. With as much stealth as he could muster, he stepped into the chamber and gently closed the door behind him. He moved forwards towards the man's bed, one careful step after another, and then, when he was just a few steps away from him,
Holy sun!
cried Ernon as he snapped straight upright in his bed, half shielding himself with his sheets. The man snatched up his sunrod from the bedside table and thrust it in the direction of the noise. The sunlight-exhausted artifact was only able to cast a dim light. That light was enough, however, to show him the bold thief sprawled on the floor next to his bed and lying in the spilled contents of the chamber pot he had apparently tripped over.
Good son! What are you doing here? My heart practically jumped out of my chest.
I was having trouble sleeping, Ernon. I think it's because you weren't snoring.
Responded the thief, catching his breath as he got back to his feet with some difficulty.
Really? You complain when I snore, you complain when I don't snore. Isn't that wonderful? Although please, do elaborate, for I fail to see the connection between not being able to sleep due to my lack of snoring, however mad that may sound, and stealthily sneaking into my room like some sort of jackroller.
Well, I just came to see. Maybe you wanted to talk. But I didn't want to wake you up in case you were sleeping, so I just wanted to check.
Talk? In the middle of the night? Believe me, the last thing I want to do when I'm having trouble sleeping is have a conversation with you, of all people. Haven't you bored me enough today in the sensoriums? Come to think of it, the soporific qualities of your constant droning might be of some use after all. I take back what I said.
So, you were also having trouble sleeping, were you? I reckon it wasn't my lack of snoring that was keeping you awake, though, was it? Or was it Lady
Hush! No talking about her.
Oh, sorry.
Good son,
muttered Ernon, glancing down at Pepper's feet and the soiled floor around him.
You probably awoke everyone in the castle with that racket. And look at the mess you've made.
Well, I'm not really the one that made this mess, if you ask me. It seems Yosemite's food didn't sit well with you, did it?
Asked Pepper, with a bit of a funny smile.
What did you expect? I am certain those disguised corpses that prepared the meals are to blame. Those putrid fingers, prodding and probing, and maybe even oozing onto our food. Oh, it turns my stomach just to think about it,
complained the priest, before continuing.
But don't change the subject. Gareth will not be pleased with this. You are already in dire need of a bath, and with this new stench I'm certain you'll be exuding tomorrow. You have turned this into an urgent matter. Sometimes I look at you, and I can see how the blue blood confuse us for farm animals. How do you suppose we should remove this stench from you now?
Can always take a swim at the big river. We used to swim there with Morton and the boys back when...
Oh no! As much as I love my home city, soaking yourself in the fetid waters of the big river, where the foul discharges of all Solarian bowels eventually found their way, is not what I would call a bath.
Maybe I could try one of the sensoriums then. A few of them had water.
Is your dull intellect not even able to comprehend what an illusion is?
Yes. I do know what an illusion is, but some of them had actual water, the real thing. I saw it with my night glass, I swear.
Well, even if that was the case, I doubt Yosamold, who probably spent thousands of hours in the meticulous creation of these works of art, would appreciate you submerging your filthy body in them to scrub off your rancid stench. Good son, sometimes you are the...
continued Ernon, quite exasperated, yet he stopped his speech short with a sudden change of expression.
I'm sorry, Pepper. I'm probably just a bit more grumpy than usual today. It's this whole place, this whole job even. It has affected me. Gorith, the Oath, the Sensoriums, Lady Idler. It's all too much. I just need some peace and quiet.
Sometimes, when things are hard, it helps to remember the good days. Like, just think of some time when you had peace and quiet. Wait, I know. Remember when I took too much swamp mead and my tongue went limp? Wasn't able to speak for hours that time. That was some peace and quiet, wasn't it?
The comment brought a smile to the priest's lips.
Of course I remember, you fool. It wasn't because you had drunk too much swamp mead. You were supposed to swallow it quickly. Lismond had warned you about it, but you did not listen. Of course you didn't. That was an entertaining evening. Life does have its moments, doesn't it?
Lismond had awoken with a start upon hearing the loud noise, and concerned it had come from one of his companions' chambers, had decided to investigate. Snatching up the witchblade, he had stepped quietly out of his room, only to be greeted by the thrall, waiting patiently in the corridor. The thrall seemed indifferent to the noise and Lismond's presence, and simply offered the thief a subtle bow of the head. Returning the nod somewhat awkwardly, Lismond had then taken up position outside the priest's door. Hearing the voices of his two companions, the man had remained there motionless, listening in on their conversation to make sure everything was fine. Soon he was content that nothing untoward had happened, and smiling to himself, had then retired back to his room. Perhaps his friends would not be well rested tomorrow morning, but he would be. A new day of adventure awaited, and he would be ready for it.